This week, we welcome Chris Long, a security engineer at Planeteer, for a technical segment about DetectionLab, a collection of Vagrant and Packer scripts that allow you to automate the creation of networks. In the security news, 5G networks must be secured from hackers, says Congressperson. Zero-day vulnerability highlights the responsible disclosure dilemma. A flaw in multiple airline systems exposes passenger data. Security bugs in video chat tools enable remote hackers. And an original World War II German message decrypts to go on display at the National Museum of Computing. In our final segment, we air a pre-recorded interview with InfoSec World speaker Connie Mostovich, the senior security compliance analyst at Reclamier, I think I said all that right, to talk about the dark web. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. Organizations' internal networks are overly permissive and can't distinguish trusted from untrusted applications. Attackers abuse this condition to move laterally through networks, bypassing address-based controls to spread malware. Edgewise abstracts security policies away from traditional network controls that rely on IP addresses, ports, and protocols, and instead ties controls directly to applications. Edgewise allows organizations to analyze the network attack surface and segment workloads based on the software and how it's communicating. Edgewise monitors applications and protects data paths using zero-trust segmentation. Visit edgewise.net/Security Weekly to get your free month of visibility. Some restrictions apply.
Like a pork rind in coffee enema, he makes your heart go pity-pat. The sexy comedy stylings of Paul Asadorian live from the Goodyear blimp right now.
Welcome to Paul's Security Weekly. This is, in fact, episode 593, recorded February 7th, 2019. We're here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left, the Dr. Doug White is in the house.
I am in the house. What's
going on? We're drinking some tawny port.
Tawny port. Yeah.
Actually, tawny is...
It is tawny port.
It is tawny port.
It's tawny.
It's not tawny like torn paper.
Like a stripper.
Yeah.
My name is Tony.
It's more like
the
stripper version of tawny. No, it's a tawny port. I don't know. What do you know about port? I don't know. I know it tastes...
You bought aged stripper brand. I don't know.
No, this was a birthday gift, Doug. It's called Sandyman. Tawny.
It's called Sandeman Tawny Port. It's very good. Yeah,
it is delicious.
It's quite high quality port.
I was always told that this went very well with cigars.
It does.
And
lots of stuff.
I agree with all those people that told me that because it is pairing very nicely.
It is very nice with the cigar. Even El Cheapo Robusto.
Even the El Cheapo Robusto.
El Cheapo Robusto.
It's Doug's new brand of cigar.
Yeah. Out, available in fine mini marts everywhere.
And then we've got wine and beer. I'm still finishing from. It's going to be a long show. Buckle up, folks. That's all I'm saying. On the lines remotely, Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
Happy to be here as always, Paul, but sure wish I was in the studio.
Yes, you do. Because it's pretty good stuff we got going on over here in terms of spirits and cigars. Jeff, I did get your email, by the way. I think people think that like all the hosts like talk to each other all the time.
Yeah.
Really, we don't get
every night. We do.
I like your idea. I think we should do a show on PCI. See there, I said it publicly, so now we have to. Jeff,
it's out there.
It's out there now. So yeah, I think it's a good idea to do that.
Cool. Jeff and I were watching reruns of I Love Lucy last night over the phone. What will she do next, Jeff? Oh, God.
Did you fall asleep on the phone together? Yeah. Also with us remotely is Mr. Lee Neely. Lee, welcome.
Hey, good to be here from Idaho. It's beautiful weather out here. Would like to hang with you guys in the studio. We got to get my butt down there one of these times or two of these times.
Do you like cigars, Lee?
Of course.
Oh, well, there, you're going to fit right in and have some cigars and spirits.
Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So what do we have next? Announcements. Thank you, Doug. So the RSA Conference is coming up on March 4th through the 8th in San Francisco. You can go to rsaconference.com/securityweekly-US19 to register now using the discount code. The U is uniform, Doug. So it's uniform, fiver, uniform.
Niner.
Fife.
Like
now you're messing with me.
No,
now people are going to send me tweets.
No, it's Fife. F-I-F-E is what you're supposed to say. That's the official. No, it is.
We'll see if the internet agrees with you or not. So now I'm told it is Fife, uniform, Niner, Sierra, Whiskey, Foxtrot, Delta to receive $100 off a full conference pass.
That's right. You have to say it with a southern accent, too, though, so you sound like Chuck Yeager. Fife, uniform, Niner, Sierra, Whiskey, Foxtrot, Delta. Unload all your pods on my position.
That's awesome. If you're interested in booking an interview with Security Weekly or a briefing at RSA, you can go to securityweekly.com/conference request. Submit your request to us. We'd love to do a briefing with you. Well, provided I'm Matt and I pick you from the list of people that we get to do briefings with, because we can't do briefings with everyone. And then we hope that you do an interview with us, because they're going to air on Enterprise Security Weekly. I mean, they cost money and stuff, but it's well worth it, in my opinion.
It's
Not
like
that I'm biased.
Getting into Studio 54. They have a velvet rope, and I stand out there and make fun of your clothes.
There you go. Chris Long is here with us tonight. Sorry to keep you waiting, Chris. He is a security engineer at Palantir, who's been specializing in detection engineering for the last decade. He is focused on detection, is OSCP and OSCE certified, but came up with a really cool project, because we're not even going to talk about that stuff. We're going to talk about his really cool project called DetectionLab, which allows you to test stuff in the lab. And here to tell you more about it is none other than Chris Long. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on the show.
Nice to have you, my friend. When you presented this to me, I was like, I really need that. And Chris like, yeah, I got a lot of things I want to do with it. I'm like, you should come on the show and talk about it, and then hopefully people will hear it, and they're like, oh, I like that, and have time to help you.
Fadi, you got to watch this. Fadi, I'm telling you, out there, wherever you are. I know you're watching, so listen to this. It's important.
So, Chris, what was the problem you were trying to solve initially with this project?
Yeah, coming into the project, I had this realization that like red teamers have something like Kali, like a distro dedicated to what they do on a day-to-day basis. And as defenders, we kind of have piecemeal like forensics tools here and there. And if you want to go ahead and spin up like a realistic lab environment, that's a ton of work typically. Like it involves spinning up multiple VMs, generally creating like Active Directory. Then you have to go ahead and like set up the centralized logging and set up all the logging and auditing settings to match what you want.
Yeah, but Chris, that's not, I mean, isn't that what the intern does? Is that?
if you're lucky enough to have one. But if you want to do something like this at home, like you're stuck doing it yourself, or
sure.
I assume you're talking as if you're replicating what's in production, right?
Yeah, it could be, I think that's like generally the use case. I mean, it could be for whatever you want, really. But what I really wanted was like a really simple way to take all that work and distill it down to like a few simple steps, and have code do the work for me rather than me, clicking through all these settings and setting up Active Directory. So that was like kind of the idea behind all of this. So effectively what it is a collection of like Packer and Vagrant scripts. If you're not familiar with those tools, it's part of the HashiCorp suite. And Vagrant, for example, allows you to take like a lot of automation steps on top of virtual machines. So that's what does a lot of the heavy lifting here.
It's kind of like Docker containers, but for virtual machines is the way I understood it. And I've worked with Vagrant a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's like a fair comparison. And so that's what does the heavy lifting. And so what happens when you run like the build script for DetectionLab is it spins up an Ubuntu host that kind of serves as like the centralized logging engine. And then it spins up an Active Directory consisting of a domain controller, a host that's dedicated to Windows event forwarding, and then a Windows 10 host that kind of is meant to simulate like maybe like an employee workstation or something like that. And then on top of that, you've got all sorts of tooling. So you have IDS and connection logging with Bro and Suricata is pre-configured. You have like Windows event logs are turned up to basically 10, and they're all feeding into a centralized Splunk instance. Sysmon and OSQuery endpoint security tooling is on all of the hosts. And I even like preload some like attack tools that I think folks might commonly want to use, like Mimikatz and PowerSploit. If you wanted to see what kind of artifacts or logs those tools generate when they're being used, this is like the perfect environment to do it in. So there's no like one use case for this. It's just getting all of that stuff automated so you can do whatever you want with it.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I want it.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Assuming you have some sort of gold image or some sort of base install for systems that might be part of this environment, do you have the ability to sort of feed that in somehow to continue the automation process?
Yeah, so I think that's probably what you would do with Packer. So I supply in the GitHub repo kind of like a template of how those like gold images will look, but you could absolutely replace those templates with your own like images and kind of build on top of those. So yeah, absolutely.
So Chris, let's back up. For those that don't start with Vagrant, for those that don't understand Vagrant, there is it like an XML? Is it XML file that you build?
So usually JSON, I think.
It's like a JSON file. It's similar to like Ansible, right? Like what is that file? I feel like there's another name for the file the configuration file. But it's like a tagging kind of config file language that you'd build in Vagrant. But you can put some logic in there too inside of Vagrant, correct?
Yeah, so it's called a Vagrant file, and that's effectively where you specify like what steps you want to be taken. But essentially, all you're doing, at least in this case, is calling like a bunch of PowerShell scripts to do all the work for you. So,
I got you. So
Vagrant file is just like,
VM,
hey, go run all these scripts.
Yeah, and then go run all these scripts on the operating system, and then so you could customize that yourself, obviously, right? The Vagrant file is customizable, right? It's open source your project, so you could do that. But now, what is the Packer? What is Packer?
So Packer is like an image creation tool. So that's what takes like code that says, hey, like create a like server 2016 image, and then it creates it into like I don't know if it's a proprietary format, but it creates like a box file, and that's what Vagrant uses as like its base image, effectively.
So does it go ahead and download like the ISO image of Windows, and then from that create a box file, which is like a VM file, like a VMware would be .vmware or whatever, right? And then spins it up? Exactly. That's awesome.
And so these work with both VirtualBox and VMware. So it's all cross-platform. All you need is an operating system, either VirtualBox or VMware, and a copy of Vagrant and Packer, which are both free to get started. So very low barrier to entry here.
Mm. Now, have you wrapped the Vagrant and the Packer things together with something, or?
Yeah, yep. There's a PowerShell build script, and there's like a POSIX-based build script. So should work for all operating systems. Inside the repo, it's just build.sh or build.ps1.
Gotcha.
And that'll allow you to like, I have pre-built boxes for folks if they want to download them rather than spending the time like manually building them.
Mm-hmm.
And then lately, I'm also working on getting this all into Terraform. So you'll literally just go in and hit Terraform apply, and then this lab will be live in AWS in like 15 minutes.
Wow, that's really cool. And I suppose you could do the same thing for AWS or Google or any of the cloud providers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. I
It's
want
really
it.
cool, right?
I'm going to get it after a while.
So Chris, take us through each of the individual systems one by one, if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's the logger host, and that's kind of what I envisioned as being like the place where all the logs would effectively be centralized. So it's running Bro and Suricata, so it's doing traffic monitoring.
So this is the Ubuntu system.
This is the Ubuntu box.
Right.
Yep, I'm sorry.
That's okay. With all the logs that go to it, Bro and Suricata. Are there interfaces for Bro and Suricata as well?
Not necessarily. They are logging centrally to Splunk, which is also
Okay.
on that instance as well.
Yep.
So you can just hop in and it's index equals Splunk, or sorry, index equals Suricata, or index equals Bro. That'll get you those logs.
Mm-hmm.
It's also running a tool built by MITRE called Caldera. It's their open source adversary simulation tool.
Mm-hmm.
So you can basically have it simulate an APT attack, and it'll go through and actually run like actual attacks on the hosts themselves. So
Yeah, how is that?
the-
They had a lot of bugs to fix early on.
They did. I
fix-
think it's in pretty good shape right now.
Okay, that's
But
good to
yeah,
know.
it's effectively like a rat on all of the systems that connects back to like the Caldera server, and it just goes and talks to them and says, "Hey, go run these attack simulations." And then it's also running an OSQuery management tool called Fleet. So that allows you to interface with like the OSQuery agents like directly and run queries against the hosts. And it's also what does like the centralized logging for OSQuery as well. And then from there, you have the host called DC, which is the domain controller. So that is effectively just doing that. On all of the Windows hosts, you have Sysmon and OSQuery as endpoint security tools. Olaf Hartong has like a really in-depth Sysmon config that I'm using. He's like clearly put a ton of time into it, and it's like very well like documented and commented to explain like what types of events it's trying to pick up.
And what was the other tool aside from Sysmon that you said?
OSQuery.
Okay. Oh, okay. So OSQuery and Sysmon are both running. And Fleet is the Linux tool that runs to look at all the stuff from OSQuery on all the hosts.
Yeah, that's correct. So all the OSQuery agents, they can run in standalone, but I think it's like great to connect them to something like Fleet, where you can interface with them directly, and you have the like added benefit of centralized logging if you do that.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Then moving on, you have the WEF host, which is basically running a Windows event forwarding or collection server. I think Windows event forwarding is like not something many people are actually familiar with. Like you can forward Windows event logs to a Windows event collector service without needing like any third-party software. Like a lot of people install just like Logstash or Splunk or whatever to collect all those logs. But Windows has like the capability to do it natively.
So it'll take in Windows event logs and it'll spit out standard Unix or POSIX syslogs.
So it accepts like Windows event logs from a bunch of hosts, and it saves them like natively as Windows event logs. But what that ultimately means is you only need like a single forwarder on those hosts rather than putting like a forwarder on every single host you want to collect Windows event logs from. And you have the added benefit of saying, I only care about these specific event logs. So you get to kind of pick and choose.
Mm-hmm.
And that prevents, you from like overwhelming things or not collecting like the right events. So we actually at Palantir have an open source repo to help folks get started with Windows event forwarding. Just as an aside, there's a lot to it, but I think our repo like really helps abstract away a lot of the work.
Nice.
And then lastly, go into the Windows 10 host. Nothing super special there, except for the fact that, it's Windows 10, kind of meant to emulate like an employee workstation, and has like the same set of tooling that the other hosts do.
That's awesome.
One other thing I meant to mention is on the WEF host as well, it's running Microsoft ATA, which I believe is Advanced Threat Analytics.
Correct, yes.
So if you're doing weird stuff in Active Directory, that's what that's there for. So if you're a red teamer, you run into an environment where they're running Microsoft ATA. Like maybe you want to go ahead and start in this lab and see if the stuff that you do on a day-to-day basis is going to get picked up before you start hammering away in like a production environment and get caught on day one.
In all those events on the Windows event forwarding host, get sent into Splunk?
Correct.
That's cool.
And so if I just jump in there on Packer, can I just add a whole bunch of other, like if I want to put something like an LDAP server or something in there, I can just go in there and add the image for that, and it'll be part of this whole thing?
Yep, absolutely. You can add hosts, you can remove hosts. Like folks might want to like also spin up like a Kali host as part of this network if they want like the attack side to be part of the network. So yeah, absolutely customizable in that sense.
That's really cool.
Is there any, or what are the limitations in terms of operating systems that you can spin up?
I think theoretically, like anything you can make an image for, you can spin up. The limitation you start running into on like local workstations is like how much RAM do you have on the box that you're running this on, how much like disk space. I think most people don't have like more than 32 gigs of RAM on like a single host. If it's like a laptop or something like that. So that I think begins to become the limitation. But if you're going to be spinning this stuff up in the cloud, like the limitation starts to, disappear. So then it turns into how much money do you want to spend on the lab? So
yeah, but this is basically Linux, Windows. I mean, you could potentially do Mac OS in a VM. Can you even do that? I've never.
I'm not sure about the licensing around that.
Yeah,
I've never tried to.
Oh, well, speaking of that, Chris, what about the licensing? So if do I need to go in these images and tweak the licensing before I spin them up?
No, some of them are running, like all of the copies of Windows are running like eval licenses.
Okay.
So they do like expire over time. So if you have the same lab image for, I think it's like 180 days, it might expire. But if you rebuild the lab, because it's syspreps, it resets the timer. So you can just like spin up the whole lab and be back to good.
I have 192 terabytes of RAM on my VM server, so I could probably spin up a pretty good one.
That's a lot of RAM.
That's a lot of RAM. It was a test project for we were trying to run at least 300 desktops at the same time.
Wow.
So with graphics.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's.
Aren't you going to get IO bound with that?
I don't know. It seems to work okay. I think the most we ever hit was I think we hit 236 one time, and they were all running. I don't know how heavy they were running. We didn't really benchmark it, but it was like people actually using it. Architecture students.
So
well, now if we knew somebody who had a script that would build a lab.
I know. I've been for years. I've been going. If there was only a script,
I think a lot of us have been.
I could see just how big that thing could get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So on the other end, what's the smallest you've tried this on?
Sorry, say it again.
Oh, yeah, what's the smallest you'd try and do this on? I mean, we talked about getting gargantuan, but what would be the minimum laptop I fished out of the closet before I
a Tandy 1000?
Yeah. If you're doing this from scratch, I would say probably like 50 to 60 gigs of disk space. You probably want 16 gigs of RAM because you are going to be running, 4 VMs at once on top of your host OS. So that would probably be like the minimum I'd run it on.
That's not bad.
That's awesome.
Good. Yeah, I mean, I run it on my 13-inch MacBook that's like 4 years old, so it runs pretty decently.
Did you do any like tuning to make it run? More universally on, smaller systems, larger systems or whatever?
Yeah, I just tried to like strip out as much of like the cruft for like Windows 10 as I could. They just keep adding more and more. So stripped out as much of that. Just like turn off services that are like probably not necessary. So like Windows Update on all the Windows servers. Like you don't want them like downloading and processing updates in the background, like while you're just trying to use it as a lab. So it's like typically small things like that, but yeah, there's only like so much you can strip out before, to make it
working.
Smaller footprint. Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. I mean, I really like that idea that you could run that on a laptop. So if you're just trying to practice up and you want something quick, because one of the problems you have for students or for somebody that's trying to study is just the amount of time it takes to build all that stuff out and get it all tweaked. And then half the time you didn't tweak it right, and it's not going to be consistent. And if you got this nice script, you can just go, pip, let me try. Oh, it sucked. Let me try again. I'm going to do something different. And
that said, you should, if you're learning, build things from scratch.
Well, you should
get that experience. But
absolutely,
even when you start learning, pick and choose where you want to start. You don't necessarily have to start with like installing and building.
Well, no, I'm talking, but you're learning pen testing, so you want a place to practice pen testing, and you can worry about building images later or before. You may already know how to do that. It just takes a lot of time. If you know how to do it, it just takes time.
Yep.
But it sounds like they at least have to build it once just to be able to create the script in order to automate it. So there's some utility built in there. And Chris, what I was getting at, just to cut to the chase, is I wonder if there's an application for this for the endpoints that are in my world, which are more often point of sale systems. rather than desktops or user workstations, where very often you're having older versions of Windows or embedded versions of Windows or compact edition versions of Windows. But it would be great, maybe not from a pen testing perspective, but that too, but also from just sort of a lab perspective, trying to get things to work, which it sounds like, if in theory you can get past licensing issues and whatnot, it would be great to be able to have sort of a virtual, store setup that has all your different point of sale systems.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I can't say that I've tried using like older or like embedded versions of Windows, but effectively, I think theoretically it should work, and there shouldn't be any like obvious limitation to doing that. So I want to cautiously say, yeah, that should be totally possible. But yeah, have not tried.
Jeff just wants you to build him a Windows 3.1 box so he can.
No, Windows 95 would do, because I got my old DVDs of Zork that I want to play.
There you go. That's what I was thinking too.
There were projects that can emulate the older Microsoft
there are. You
operating
can get
systems,
emulators and things like that to run that stuff.
I think you need
DOS
special
emulators.
I think you need special emulators, though, Chris, right? I mean, the operating systems you're running are very modern, and you have a nice repeatable process. I'm sure you could probably choose a different architecture and run some of the older ones with other emulators.
Yeah, I suspect as long as it's supported in like VirtualBox or VMware, it could probably be part of the lab.
Yep.
We got DOS to run on VirtualBox.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, like actual DOS. We had all the floppy disks, and we installed it because I knew this person who was trying to run old Fortran programs that he had a compiler for DOS. And it was like, yeah, work.
Well, Doug or Lee, maybe you could remember the details better than I can. What was the great divergence point for Windows? Was it 2000? Where the architecture
3.0.
No.
No, it was 2000. Yeah,
NT4 to 2000.
But there was a divergence point between 3.0 and 3.1 because 3.0 didn't work and 3.1 did. So.
Well, there's that.
Yeah, I guess the limitation is it's like probably going to have to support like Ethernet. I don't know if you could hook up like Token Ring to this. So,
you'd have to build a stack or something to get it to work. So.
There's emulators for all kinds.
There
of
is.
things.
You can get stack emulators, or you could put I don't know. You could put something on there.
Or you could get what Chris provided, and it'd probably work every time.
Yeah. But we like to break things.
That was one of the points I thought was really awesome. Is you're mentioning you get somebody who's not really up on building the environment. He can frickin' build a known working environment every time with this. Yep. And it seems like you could even maybe create a library of different environments for different kinds of tests or something.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Maybe Jeff could create the PCI build.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Speaking of like repeatability, so that was like an issue I ran into early on, is like there were intermittent failures, because when you're dealing with a project that's this big, there's so many dependencies. There's so many small things that can change that can like cause a build to fail or something. So one of the things that I did as well is I created like a continuous integration build. So basically every week on Saturday, DetectionLab has like a scheduled build and gets kicked off, and we verify that, the entire build process will be successful, and each host comes up and each host is able to talk to each other, and all of the tools that are installed are still good to go. I wanted
Chris,
people
that's
to be able
awesome.
to,
but you
log
say
into this tool and sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's awesome. But you say are there other people collaborating with you on this project, or are you in need or want other people helping?
It's the royal we.
Yeah, I actually didn't even realize I said we. There have been contributors to the project. The continuous integration stuff has been me, but there have also been people that have contributed to DetectionLab. So I guess in a broad sense, we.
Gotcha. And so are you looking for more people to help contribute as well?
Yeah, absolutely. There's contribution guidelines right in the repo. And if anyone has things that they think would be improvements or like positive changes to the project, they're always encouraged to open a PR, or if they run into bugs, open an issue. I'm pretty active looking at them. This is like something I do in my free time. So it's not, I'm not 24/7 on this, but when there's stuff I can fix, I definitely do fix it.
It's awesome.
Great.
Chris, anything else about the project you want to share with our audience, especially where you find it? Yeah,
so the easiest way to find it, the URL is detectionlab.network. or you could just look it up on GitHub. My username there is Kwong. The only thing I wanted to say, I wanted to thank Don Murdoch because he actually spun up a GoFundMe and was the one who introduced me to you guys. So thank you to him for spinning up the GoFundMe to kind of fund further development of the lab. And I just wanted to thank everyone who's listening and everyone who's contributed to it so far. And obviously you guys for having me on the show today.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chris. That's detection.network.
And it's in the show notes on the wiki, so you can
wiki.securityweekly.com. Yeah.
So if you want to grab it off there.
Awesome, Chris. Thank you. Oh, wait. We have to do 5 questions.
You got to ask him 5
We
questions.
got to do 5 questions.
He has a script to answer them.
That's right. He's going to build a virtual version of himself to answer. So, Chris, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Sure, why not?
Chris, 3 words to describe yourself.
Tenacious, impatient, and dedicated.
Chris, if you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
I don't know why a shovel was like the first thing that popped in my head. So
Did you look at a shovel? Because you looked to your right. Were you like looking for
what about you?
Shovels to my right. I'm not like in a garage.
Those dead bodies hanging over there. What did I used to kill them
They're not
with?
going to bury themselves.
It's
Hey,
a
Mr.
virtual
Gimp,
show.
what did I use on you?
It's multi-purpose.
That was awesome.
That was perfect, yeah.
Chris, if you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Oh, man. The man with infinite computer rage.
Chris, you seem like a pretty happy guy, though. Now, this question's easy. There's only 2 possible answers, so it's multiple choice, and there's only 2. All right, you ready? In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
First.
See how easy that is? Chris, choose 2 celebrities to be your parents. Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Or even missing.
Oh, man. Like Jeff
Alien.
Goldblum as my dad.
Awesome choice. Loved him in Jurassic Park.
And Judi Dench as my mom.
Wow, that'd be cool. And
Interesting.
eclectic.
Oh,
I feel like you could have they're like spy parents or something.
And there'd be jazz.
And there'd be jazz.
Yeah.
Jeff Goldblum's a great jazz pianist.
I knew that.
Yeah, he's great.
They just seem like nice people. I don't know. Never hear anyone talking shit about either of those people. So
There you go. Well, Chris, thank you very much for appearing on Security Weekly. Detection.network to check out Chris's project. Thank you very much, Chris. With that, we'll take a short break. Come back, and we'll do the stories for this week. How about that?